Oh.
Why do they hide that at the bottom in a big green box?
I know, exactly. I need it like 5 times as big and arrows going to it and whistles blowing.
It almost had that. It's like, what? You've really been looking at that all morning?
Oh, that's great. Well,
That's,
good. See, we figured it out.
we did figure it out. So welcome, Jude. Welcome, Selena. And great. Ewan can see us. Oh, yay. Yay, yay, yay. And good. We've got a few people here. Thank you, folks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm here. I'm Molly Gordon. Most of you know who I am. And if you are on the phone and you have background noise, you can mute yourself by pressing *6. That'll be helpful. And so Barb, let me see. I want to introduce you. Who the heck is Barb Patterson?
Yeah. What the heck is she doing here?
So Barb Patterson is she's a coach and the owner of a coaching and consulting company that brings the insights of the 3 principles to her work with coaches and leaders and entrepreneurs from around the world. She's done a lot of work in organizations with leadership and development. She's worked with and coached CEOs and top executives from all regions of the world. She's mentored other coaches to do the same thing. She's lived across the U.S., Africa, and my favorite, in Paris. Today, in addition to running her own coaching and consulting business, Barb is partnering with Linda and George Pransky, developing 3 principles-based practitioners through mentoring, training, and one-on-one work. She's also on the faculty of Michael Neal's Super Coach Academy 2014, and I met Barb through her work with the Pranskys up in La Conner. And actually, Barb has been one of my own mentors, and it was in talking with her about some things that have come up in my coaching business that I came upon a theme that I thought would be fun to explore in this hangout. And so I invited Barb to join me. Hey, Barb.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for the invite. It is always a pleasure to hang out with you. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, you know, we were talking the other day, and I was telling you that I see something in myself. I see it in clients, but I also see it in myself. And it's a way in which I feel, and I see clients feel, responsible for managing our lives and our experiences and ourselves. To be on top of things. So be on top of what's going on in life, be on top of what's going on in business. And the one that I'm most intrigued by lately is be on top of what's going on with me. It's like I'll have an insight into how my thinking is creating my experience. And on the heels of that insight will come the thought, now, how do I remember that? How do I stay on top of that? What practice should I choose to keep this good groove going? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you've pointed out to me that maybe it's easier than that.
Maybe it could be easier, right?
Yeah, and I thought that would be a great thing to explore because I know so many of the people that I work with and talk to share a deep commitment to, well, to waking up. You know, and I think there's a way in which we've understood spiritual growth to be a process that comes after effort and striving. And that you kind of have to be on top of it if you want to grow spiritually.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Me too, by the way, raised my hand to that one. And, hi, my name is Barb Patterson, and I'm a striver and a self-improvement seeker, and all of that. And, really, I lived my, life pretty much always curious about people and human nature and how we worked and what went on. And underneath that was also this desire to self-improve and, to strive to learn. And, in many ways, you could argue, well, good thing, right? You had a great career, you were promoted, you got to, these wonderful opportunities. Like, it makes sense. Yeah, you strive and you look at your own development and you look to learning and improvement and how to be better and how to make other things better. Like, in a way, you could look at my life and say, well, yeah, you were rewarded for that too. Makes sense. Good girl, right? Way to go. And that's absolutely how I saw it. But what happened is, over the last number of years, the last 3 years in particular, I've started to have some personal insights that had me relook at that. That, I was a few years ago, and Molly, I know you that know the story, but a few years ago when I was living in Paris and I was the head of a global function for an organization, and my norm, like, I was a fish to water. Like, I had a good life. I liked what I did. I liked the people I worked with. And I was busy. I was traveled 90% of the time, just like many people, like busy lives, busy things. But life was good. I didn't see a problem. And yet I had this personal sort of gut wisdom thing saying it's time to make a change. And that came forward, and, at first as kind of a subtle whisper of, hey, what do you think? Maybe you could go back out on your own. And over time, that idea took root inside me and became something that I got really excited about. I could feel on a personal sort of level, call, whatever it might be, that it was time to make a change. And I was really fulfilled in my career life, and I thought, I want to create a lifestyle, and a personal life is fulfilled as well, like, and that became sort of the impetus. Well, when I quit and I decided that, it was time to go back out on my own, I thought, okay, well, I need a coach to help me. I need a sounding board. I got to get my list in order. I got to do my networking, all those things that I needed to do. And at the time, I hired Michael Neal, and some of you may be familiar with him. And what was interesting was, similar to how my inner voice, my kind of wisdom, that inclination that was just a kind of a soft sound at first of maybe it's time for a change, and then that evolved into, yeah, going out on your own would be great, and then feeling like, just knowing with certainty that that was the thing to do. Then in that, I also, in my exploration for a coach, I'd never heard of Michael. I didn't know who he was, but ran across his name through something, and it was another thing about my gut just kept telling me he's the right guy. I'm going to work with him. Now, I thought I was working with him because he had a successful practice. He knew the coaching world and all of that, right? Which was great. But ultimately, it wasn't, I know, on a deeper level why I picked him, And when I started working with Michael, he began speaking to me about the three principles behind our human experience. And for those of you that don't know what I'm referring to, I'll talk to that throughout the call. But what happened was, Michael began to talk to me in a way that woke something up inside of me that was already there, but it sort of woke it up from a sleep, and it began to bring to life all of my learning and experiences. And let me be a little more clear so it doesn't sound so elusive. You know, as I said, I'd always been a seeker. I'd always been a learner. I'd always been into self-improvement. So my background had a lot of personal development. I taught, I had a psychology background. I taught personal development seminars for a number of years. My coaching that I'd been doing for a number of years was very much about the whole person. And I used to see myself and people as this sort of combination of strengths and weaknesses. And, the question was, how do we leverage the strength and overcome the weaknesses, right?
Right.
And so I looked at myself in that way, and I looked at others in that way. And so my work with myself and my work with others was all around, okay, if you want to get from A to B, what's underneath that might block you from getting there? What's your psychology? What strengths and weaknesses do you need to look at? And what subconscious issues might you need to explore so they don't, bite you in the rear later on? So it was very much how I viewed the world. Well, in addition to that, I was also kind of always a spiritual seeker, just kind of interested and, believed that we were a part of something bigger. But it felt elusive to me. And by that, I mean, it felt kind of random. Like I definitely could look back at my life and feel like there were these times when I was in this flow and something magical was happening and opportunities just lined up and and it was awesome. And, so I'd ask myself like, well, how do I do that again? How do I get there? What's that about? And, so I was looking to how do you create that more often and what is that in my life? Then I was looking to my own self-improvement and my own psychology and my own behavior of how do I improve that and doing that with my clients as well. So, when you talk about a lot of work, you can get a feel for, I had a lot on my mind. A lot I thought that, we all personally had to look at and explore if we wanted change. Because I'd always been curious about transformation, and probably like many of you, I was curious why some people changed and some people didn't. I was curious why I could change some areas but not others, no matter how much I wanted it or tried to control it or make it happen. I'd stumble. Now, in my old world, that would be because I had some subconscious issue that I hadn't unveiled yet. It would be because maybe I lacked a certain kind of character. Like I really assessed myself in a way about those things, and very much from the premise of it must be me or my client that's the problem. There must be something going on. Otherwise, I'd have everything I wanted. They'd have everything they wanted.
Right. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, come on. So anyway, as I began to work with Michael and he introduced me to these principles, what began to happen was it began to fill in the blanks to some of those questions, to some of those things. It began to kind of collapse all my experiences and learning and bring them together in a really beautiful way. And that showed up in just having conversation about, what I was up to, what I was experiencing. And one of the most pivotal conversations that I had early on was probably like the week after I quit my job, and I was like, okay, I'm on it. Come on, bud. I got my strategy, I got my list, let's talk about it. These are the people I need to contact. And I very much had that in front of me and, was talking. And Michael said to me, Barb, I have no doubt that you'll be successful in your business. He said, you've already been successful in life, so I know you'll be able to attain that level of success. and you'll be able to use your current strategies and your current thinking to replicate that. And he said, so that's not a problem. And he said, but potentially what you rob yourself of is an opportunity to have a whole new experience of who you could be in the world. And when I heard that, I got really struck. Now, I didn't know exactly what he meant, right? But the idea that I could have a whole new experience of who I was in the world was compelling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was interesting to me because I could feel underneath that this idea of potential and possibility. And so we talked about it a little bit more. And really, if you look at it in a couple of ways, one is if we have the well of memory versus the well of inspiration. So the well of memory is where all of our experiences, education, our knowledge, our successes, our failures, that's where that all sits. In the well of inspiration is the unknown. It's where new thought, creativity, new ideas, potential, it's where that sits. And at any time we can draw from either well.
Right.
But I got really curious about what it would be like to draw from the well of inspiration more and to build my business from the well of inspiration versus my known tactics and my strategies and my ideas. And again, at first, this was all very much kind of a feeling gut. I could feel something resonating, but I didn't know what that looked like. I knew it sounded good and there was something kind of come into life inside of me, but I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was in, you know? I said, yeah, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the creative potential and possibility of creating from that space just really resonated with me. So it was kind of at that moment that I started to get really curious about this idea of potential and possibility and opportunity, and where, when we're creating and moving forward in life, where does that really come from? So over time, and as I sat in that curiosity, one of the things I began to see was, in hindsight, and I think you could probably say the same thing, and everyone who's listening, that when I looked back at my life at kind of those defining moments, those moments that I was touched deeply, or the moments where they kind of changed the trajectory of my life or my career,
Right.
those were when life presented me opportunities and I said yes. Now, when I looked at those, I realized I had nothing to do with those opportunities being presented. Like, I didn't control them. I didn't make them happen. They came out of the blue, or they came through a relationship, or they came, like, if I looked, I could maybe connect dots, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I want everyone to look at the idea that I made it happen somehow, that I controlled it and made it happen, just didn't hold up anymore.
Right.
And when I started to see that life presents us opportunity all the time and possibility, when I started to see that, I realized it started to loosen up this idea that it was all up to me, that I had to be on it and make it happen and push and strive. I started to relax that a little bit. It started to, like loosen up.
Right.
And as that happened, the other thing that happened was I started to feel, how I said a moment ago that the pressure I felt was like a fish to water, the striving, pushing with my job, with my life, all that. I didn't feel bad. I mean, it was my norm. But as that started to relax more, I started to feel the difference in my body and in the way I was walking around. I started to see, oh, wow, I had a lot of pressure about striving and improving and managing myself and overcoming that carried a lot of weight, carried a lot of internal pressure.
Right.
And as I got free from a little bit of that and more perspective and a little distance, what happened was I noticed that my thinking opened up, that my mind quieted down, that when I wasn't pushing myself internally to get it right, to be better, that when I began to trust more in the well of inspiration, in the unknown, in that there's something else going on there, that it's not all up to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I began to explore that, I saw evidence of it more and more. And in that evidence, it allowed me, again, to relax, and my mind opened up. And the other thing that I began to see was the relationship between a quieter mind and the possibility and potential I saw in the world.
Oh.
That when I got tight and worried about my business, which I did often, it's as if the aperture would close, right? And everything would get more mirrored, and I'd be looking through all my concern and my worry and say, nothing's happening, right?
That never happens to me.
No, I know. Try and relate, Molly. Do your best to try and relate, yeah. So, but what happened was as I began to look and see more and more, like contemplate and see and be curious about this idea that it's not all up to me. I didn't have to work as hard as I thought, that there might be something else going on here. That in the unknown could be more potential than I even knew possible. And as my mind began to quiet, the aperture opened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it makes sense that I would see more possibility and opportunity. And those things that seemed to just fall on my lap, there was a feeling of where all of a sudden things fell on my lap and, oh, opportunity, will I say yes? Oh, what's going on here? Let me see. Now, when let's be real, as I said, I jokingly said it, but it's true. Like I would go in and out of that. I'd go into a lot of fearful thinking about my business and what I wanted to do. I'd be afraid that maybe I was just telling myself a bunch of BS as an excuse to not work. Like I had all kinds of internal thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned to not respect that thinking and to see it as just a temporary fearful thought, insecure thought versus a truth. And as that thinking began to lighten up, again, as I wouldn't hang on to it, it would go away. And the spaciousness and the quieter mind would come. And again, in that, I would hear my wisdom, I'd hear the next thing, I'd see more possibility. So what originally, when Michael said that to me, and what originally felt true, but I had no sense of it, but something inside of me said this is true, I began to see evidence of it in my own life. And, when I began to work with George and Linda, and George would just reinforce the idea that we create, that creating with less on our mind, that less on our mind was the key to creation and the key to our best thinking, our best selves, our best lives in so many ways. We could talk hours just on that topic alone. But again, all I had at the beginning was something feels right here. There's something that feels true, even though this goes against all my years of doing it. Much more driven, much more controlled, much more striving. There was something inside of me and my wisdom, my innate intelligence that was saying, pay attention.
Right.
And as I decided I would, and I kind of had to talk myself off a ledge a couple times, right? But as I kept staying more curious about this inspiration and the unknown and where our creativity comes from, where potential really sits, that what began to happen was I started to have evidence too. Like all of a sudden clients came forward. All of a sudden opportunity came forward. Now, what's funny to note about that is it didn't look the way I thought it would look. Mm-hmm. Right? I had a plan and an agenda in a way that logically made sense, and I think everyone would have agreed with me. But it didn't look that way. But I kept saying yes to whatever my inclination, whatever wisdom, that inner voice kind of said. And then what happened was my life, my business grew from that place. In other words, what I mean by that is my business, my life evolved from keeping a quieter mind, looking to what was in front of me, saying yes to whatever those inclinations, that internal wisdom was saying, and just moving forward, and doing as much as possible to not get compelled and enraptured by my habitual thinking or my insecure thinking, right? The more I could just relax and I stayed curious about this, 3 years later now, I have a lot of evidence of the truth in that. That I don't have to work as hard as I thought I did. And about a few months ago, the company I used to work for asked me to come back and do some work for them. And so I went into the office and I was super excited to see everybody. When I left, I didn't leave a problem, right? I loved my job, loved my boss, the people I worked with, and what I did. Today, I love my job, love the people I work with, and love the work I do. But what was interesting was going in through those doors again gave me like this wonderful kind of snapshot in time. And while both of those things are true, love my job, the work, the people, the feeling I walk around in today is completely different than the one I walked around in then.
Right.
The one I walked around in then was striving and pushing and driving and managing and controlling. And by the way, I wasn't a crazy intense person. This is an internal thing, right? But now I walk around with more ease, more connected to myself and to the people around me. Less pressure. I'm not saying I don't do that, right? I'm human, hello. But it was a significant kind of awakening moment of seeing that, oh, wow, I can create the life I want, the relationships, those things and I don't have it's not as up to me as I think. There's a way in which I can rely on this deeper intelligence of life, this well of inspiration to back me, to cover me, to partner with me, whatever you want to say. And there's a way in which I can move through the flow of life versus pushing. And I think that just the point I want to say is I'm a little aware that sometimes this language can sound jargony,
right.
Especially for those of us that have been explorers and seekers. We've heard be in the moment, go with the flow, let go of attachment. Like I've heard all those things before.
Exactly.
But just because I had heard them and sort of I believed them intellectually, they weren't a truth for me. They weren't integrated. They were another idea and another thing to add to my list to do.
Exactly. So how and here's a how do you question, which is kind of a contradiction in terms.
Yeah.
How do you go from an intellectual understanding to the level of insight where you go, oh my God, this is just how it works?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. And what I would say is probably, one of the most significant ways that's changed in the way I work with people is rather than my evaluations, my assessments, and my intuition, which I, always felt connected to, using that as a way to assess people and help them create strategies and techniques to, overcome or leverage whatever it might be. Remember earlier when I said I'd always been curious about change,
right?
And why some people changed and why I could and couldn't, right? And I just assumed it was in myself kind of a faulty character, default, or defect or something. What I began to see in this work and the way I work with people now is if you think about it and you look for your own life too and the people, that you know and love, that change happens, transformation happens when we see something different. So we can think something's a good idea, but never be able to change, right? Because it kind of remains intellectually a good idea. But when something shifts inside of us where we see it different, as soon as we see it different, our behavior naturally follows. We don't have to control it. It's a natural thing. So one thing that I used to think was evolving was a job. It
Right.
was on us. But as I slowed down, right, and started to look for in this well of inspiration and where potential comes from, where insight and new understanding comes, I started to see that our evolution is natural. Like, truthfully, I would have evolved even if I hadn't given myself that job. We evolve. Human beings evolve. We grow. We learn. You may have a judgment about you want to do it faster or more of it, whatever it may be. But when we can look objectively, you start to see, oh no, evolution, our evolvement is natural. Like as we grow and go through life, we get more perspective. We get more understanding. And that's not because we do it as a job. It happens, it's natural. So as I started to see this idea of evolution being natural, and that this resource that we all have inside of us and have been using and accessing, this innate intelligence, our wisdom, as we've all been using that our whole life, and that has shown up in really practical and profound ways. That wisdom shows up in a moment when maybe we're a mother and a child gets sick and we have to adapt. We got to figure it out and adapt. That's our innate wisdom. It might show up that we're at work and we're there's a meeting and we get a new idea and a creative solution for it. It might show up, or think about, inspired ideas. They did a survey and they asked inventors and business leaders when they got their best ideas. And the top three were shower, drive, and vacation.
Right, right.
And that makes sense. That goes to what I was saying before, less on our mind, high performance, less on our mind. We have more access to that innate wisdom. But you see it every day. You meet somebody new and, you have this spontaneous conversation. That's our innate intelligence coming through. You just start to see that, oh yeah, what before I thought was random, when I said, oh, I wish I could be in the flow more, I wish I could have magic happen more often, I used to think was random and elusive. But what I started to see as I explored this, right, this well of inspiration, this idea, is I started to see that, oh no, that's constant.
Huh.
That's constant. The only reason I feel separate is because I'm compelled by my thinking and I'm lost in my thinking. But when I quiet it down enough, I feel that connection. I'm sorry, Molly.
Or I'm looking for something other than what's happening in this moment.
Yeah, that's nice. Exactly. Yeah, so to your question about that's insight. When you all of a sudden you see something, like you get touched, something happens, and your perspective shifts, and you start to see something fresh, and every single one of us can think of it. If you think about it like a glass elevator, and some of you may have heard this analogy, but I think it's such a great one. On the bottom floor of a glass elevator, you're looking out, all you can see is what's there on the bottom floor. But as you rise up and you go up, you get to see more and more of the view, right? To where eventually you're at the top and you can see the vista. Well, the same is true for us in our experience, in this idea that, at one level of consciousness, a problem looks unsolvable. People look like a compilation of strengths and weaknesses and issues to overcome. That was at one level of consciousness for me. And then as I began to quiet my mind, to look on the unknown, to start to see evidence of my innate intelligence, this wisdom, this being a part of something bigger. And what happened was, from these higher levels of consciousness, my sight changed, right? What I saw was different. And once I saw it, I didn't have to work on changing. It's once you see it, our behavior naturally follows. Now, do I still get lost in my fearful thinking and concern? I do. But the really good news is part of this innate intelligence and this consciousness wakes us up at some point. And when I wake up, I remember what I saw. So did I answer your question?
Well, I think so. And there's still is persistent. So how do I quiet my mind? How do I notice what's there? But what I'm getting this morning, Barb, is one, don't expect those questions and impulses to figure out how to go away. That's part of my human experience.
Right.
And that it's almost paradoxical. It's as soon as I'm looking for a way to remember what I'm seeing in this moment, I've left this moment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and like most strivers, right? Takes one to know one.
Mm-hmm.
We hear something, we get a little struck and we think, okay, this is good. And then we immediately go to, okay, how do I use it? How do I make it work? How do I apply it? Right?
Right.
What I'm speaking to and would love all of us just to give ourselves the opportunity and kind of take a break from having to apply this conversation today.
Wow.
And having to leverage it, right? Having to turn it. Yeah. And the reason I say that is often that insight, seeing something from within where real change happens, that's a different feel and it's a different way than our intellectual pursuit and application and striving and improving. It's a different feel. Mm-hmm. And by allowing yourself just to sit in the feeling that something might be sparked here, you don't know what it is, holding it lightly, letting your own wisdom, your own intelligence kind of work together to bring something to life for you that'll be just for you. Mm-hmm. That'll allow you to deepen what's being said here today and to integrate it and to see something fresh, something new from the well of inspiration that maybe you haven't seen before. Or it'll deepen something that was an intellectual idea. It may take it and deepen it now to where it's something else.
Right.
So yeah.
What comes to mind, kind of often left field, but to me it's related, is how my love and relationship with my husband has grown over the years. And that it's been a process of enjoying what I've got, not trying to remember to love him, not trying to remember his good points, but more of a relaxing into it when I feel it, and not sweating it when I don't.
Yeah.
And that relaxing into it has it's grown and grown and grown until it's really quite mind-boggling to me. Yeah. And it's like it fills the space. But that's not because I visualized loving my husband this much.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't make any effort. I relaxed into. You were talking about a feeling, and that's what got me thinking about. Yeah. I have a nice feeling when I think about Miles, when I hug Miles. And I just started to trust that nice feeling more than my cranky feelings.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I love that. And I think what it points to, too, is, what I started to see was the fallacy of that we are this, we have strengths and weaknesses. I started to see the fallacy that it can't be true, that there's this, energy out there and things change and that there's all this potential. I could feel the truth of that. And then I said, well, it can't be true then that I'm this set thing, that my personality is set, my weaknesses are set, even though I had a lot of evidence. Yes. I just started to see that didn't hold up, that maybe I didn't know everything I thought I knew about that. And once I got willing to maybe be wrong about this idea that we're this set personality, I started to see, well, yeah, it's true. Yeah, sometimes you have a tendency to be an introvert, but other times you're not. So it can't be a fixed thing. Sometimes you're disciplined and sometimes you're not. So it can't be true that you're undisciplined. You know, like I started to see that, you know, I had made up all these ideas about who I was that really were limiting me versus a truth.
Mm-hmm.
And as that began to loosen up, I started to see what was underneath that. And I started to see and point to exactly what you're saying, that actually our default setting is health and well-being. Like at our innate nature, our, you know, core, my true essence is not defective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, love is a default setting. Connection is default. Um, Acceptance is default. Neutrality, openness, that I started to see the well-being and the health of me and my clients, and that was the foundation. I wasn't this thing that needed to be fixed and molded and shaped. And every time I went in that direction, I made life harder and more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I started to get curious about the unknown and this potential, and I started to look to the health of me and my clients, what opened up there was more and more opportunities of just what you said, where I sat in connection to somebody I loved or to a client, to myself, where I felt feelings of connection and love and peace, you know? And it's like I said, that feeling that I walk around in now versus then, I know that I am touched more by life and people than I was before. And I would have given myself an A on relationships and my ability to build rapport before.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have any clue about how much more was on offer. And the more I relaxed into this idea that at our true essence, everything is fine, is health and well-being and nothing to repair, that anything is up for grabs, that we're connected to this infinite potential and possibility. As I began to get more and more curious about that, I had evidence in my own life and my clients as well.
Right. You know, and I'm not sure I'm going to get the pronunciation of this name right, but Yvonne commented, is there really anything or something to apply? Aren't we the principles in action already from the very start?
Beautifully said, Yvonne. Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. And that's it, right? Can you feel that when Molly reads that and Yvonne speaks it? Can you feel Yvonne's kind of true essence coming forward? And there's a way in which when we just take that in, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I sort of just, yeah, I relax into that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I love the phrasing that we are the principles in action. There's something in that that just strikes me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an application, it's we're an expression of something that's already happening.
Yeah, yeah.
What you were saying about strengths and weaknesses really landed with me too. That really it's a myth that I'm a set being and that I've got this set of strengths and this set of weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm noticing so frequently, and it's easier to see it in others, I think, than in myself. But I'll be working with a client who is living in the conviction that her history is defining, and that it's something to work through or heal from, or that even though she's healed from it, it's always there. And it's so clear to me that that is a made-up container for her experience that doesn't have any significance apart from what she gives it in the moment. And I'm, like I said, it's easier for me to see in someone else.
Yeah,
What am I holding as real that is really entirely held up by my thinking?
Yeah. I kind of decided to get suspicious of all the ideas I had about myself. You know, and I got willing to say, what if I'm wrong? You know? What if I didn't see the full picture, even though I might have lots of evidence from my past to say it's so? You know, I used to think I was a compilation, as I said, of my strengths and weaknesses, but also of my past experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And while, I'm not saying our past didn't have some way in shaping us. That's not what I'm saying. But that's totally separate. The thing I saw was my past has absolutely nothing to do with my potential in this moment and in the future. Nothing. That everything, anything is up for grabs. And all that happens is at times, in our human nature, all of us, all humans will do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
We bring into the present our ideas of who we are. And that shapes it. But ultimately, we're a part of this, infinite potential and possibility and creative life force, and that means us too. So it's the idea that anybody listening can have a whole new experience of who they are in the world is there. Mm-hmm. And my life and the life of a lot of people I care about and know, who have began to look in this direction too, I know they'd agree with me when I say it's better than I could have predicted or planned. And having been such a planner before, it's still funny to me to even hear those words come out of my mouth. That the idea that life unfolds. I show up, right?
Right.
I show up, I engage in life, engage in the moment, I follow my gut, my inclinations, all of that. I'm not saying I don't work hard at times, right? But what I'm saying is the idea that it's all up to me is ridiculous to me now.
Right.
Where before, I believed it was an absolute truth.
Right. It's funny about the working hard piece. Lately, I've been saying yes to a lot of things that in the past I would have reflexively said no to.
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
I don't want to get too busy.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my weekends are inviolate and nothing after 5 o'clock. And I was really controlling my time and my experience, big time. And I started to just loosen that up. It's like, what if it's not a big deal if I work on Saturday morning?
Yeah.
What if I get tired? What if that's not a big deal? And it's just interesting. There's a way in which showing up for more is actually more relaxing than trying to have a relaxed life.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's totally possible to work hard, but not be efforting all the time.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I think all of us can relate to that. Those days when you've worked really hard and had a ton going on, but you walk away at the end of the day like jazzed and inspired and not exhausted. And other days where, you feel like you've done physical labor all day.
Right.
That's a function of our thinking and our internal pressure and stress.
Right.
Yeah, nothing more. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for me, I think a lot of what makes it pressure and stress is thinking that I have to do whatever it is I'm doing in a certain way.
Yeah.
Instead of just showing up and going, I wonder what the heck's going to happen next.
Yeah. That's right.
So I disconnected the phone because I was getting weird background noise and music, and it was very distracting. So if anyone has a question or a comment, you can use the page, the Google Hangout page, to make a comment or question. And this has just been really rich, Barb.
Oh, thank you. It's something that's been really close to my heart, so I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah. And I see a few people still watching. Maybe no questions. So let me see what's coming up for me. Well, what's come home for me in this conversation, let's see if I can put words around it, is that it has to do with the answer to the how to remember, how to be in this insight, how to keep insights alive piece. And what I glimpsed a little while ago was that taking that question seriously is what takes me away from whatever insight will serve me in the moment. That those questions are likely to come up. I'm going to have those wonderings. But those are also just thoughts.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have to invest that question, how do I blah, blah, with any significance. And when I don't invest it in any significance, it floats away and I'm free to do whatever is in front of me.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, it's like giving ourselves permission to just see if there might be another way. And see what your wisdom, what your insight shows you. Right.
That's great. Well, I'll take one more look at questions here. Whoopsie daisy, so many windows. Okay, I don't see any others. I want to thank everybody for bearing with us with the technical difficulties. It strikes me there's something metaphorical about the fact that I'm looking at the Google Hangout screen, trying to figure out how in the heck you start the broadcast, trying to press on a button that isn't lit up in any way that says off air and change that, when all the time there's this green box that says start broadcast.
Oh, I love it.
When I try to live my life right, I'm looking
that's
at the wrong box.
That's right. We just can't see. You're on the bottom elevator of Google Hangout, and you went back up and you saw the button. Yeah.
So, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Barb. I always get so much out of speaking with you, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, all.